And so I want to say, I miss you. I miss you guys. I miss being able to be here and just being able to gather together. What a strange time we find ourselves in this past week. Strange, and maybe this coming week will be even stranger. This kind of black cloud that's descending on us, not just locally, as a country, as a world, in many ways. And so this angst, this fear that is so easy to grip us. And so we spend a lot of our time listening to the media, the latest updates and the latest reports, and trying to track it all, and yet not being able to do anything about it. It's really rather frustrating. And so to be able, for now, to be able to take a time out, just take some time out, and to avert our eyes not on this darkness and cloud, but onto Jesus, who offers us a different view, a different hope, a different opportunity to be able to refocus ourselves. And so I hope you're able, in this time when we're spending a lot of time indoors and probably in our homes, to be able to find ways each day, throughout the day, of anchoring ourselves with Jesus, and being able to see who he is and the kinds of things that he does. And so this morning, we want to look at him. We want to look at him in the gospel lesson. And I especially want to look just at this first piece of this well-known, really beautiful healing story of Jesus' encounter. But I want us to look at him and to hear his teaching and how it is that he deals with the disciples in a particular challenge that they have. So it says in the gospel lesson, it says he went out and he saw a man blind from his birth. And his disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" So this is festival time, and so Jesus is walking around, and the crowds of people and beggars all over the place, and lame people, and all kinds of folks, just kind of all over the place, and yet Jesus, his eyes focus in on one, and he sees him. He focuses on one guy, and he sees him. So for Jesus, this is not just a mass of human beings. It's a person, and Jesus pays attention to him. And so the disciples are there kind of following along. They're watching him, and they see that he's stopped in order to be able to look at this guy. And so they say, "So Jesus, tell us, so who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Now, during the time of Jesus, the assumption was that if something was wrong with somebody, it was because somebody sinned. I mean, how else would that have been? I mean, they were pre-scientific. They didn't know about bacteria and viruses. They assumed that if something was wrong with somebody, that somebody sinned, and that's why they were being punished. And so they're trying to diagnose the situation. It's almost as if they are like interns following behind the teacher doctor. So they got their clipboards, and they're saying, "Oh, this is patient number 1397624. And so how did this person get this way? Was it because of their sin or somebody else's?" Looking at him, but really kind of seeing a case, not a face. Not a person. But Jesus sees the person, the individual. And he says, nobody sinned to make him this way. It wasn't the fault of anybody that he was this way. It is interesting in this time. We do like to find fault, don't we? Somehow in our psychology, somehow that makes us feel better. So to be able to find fault with the government. And so why didn't this virus, why didn't they intervene sooner, and why didn't they do things earlier in order to be able to prevent it from happening? Or it was the Chinese. It was because the Chinese didn't fess up that the virus was there, and that they didn't disclose it transparently earlier. And all of those things probably have some truth to them, but blame. Somehow we feel that if we can put the responsibility on others and create blame for them, somehow that allows us to feel like it exonerates us or makes us feel more powerful when we don't feel very powerful at all. But Jesus says, no, nobody sinned. Nobody sinned. Nobody did anything that was wrong. It wasn't because of that. He said, this has happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. The glory of God being displayed in his life. Now, he's not meaning that God somehow made him that way. God didn't make the virus come. God didn't make this man born blind. But in the midst of this circumstance, in the midst of this time, Jesus will use it to be able to bring glory to God. He will intervene and bring honor to God, to show God the kind of person, to show people the kind of person that God is. And then you know the story. So then Jesus, he spits, and he makes some mud, and he puts it on the man's eyes, and he sends him to the pool of Siloam, and as he washes there, he's healed. And we would like for that to be how God heals us all the time, wouldn't we? We would like for Jesus to just be able to, in our situation in pain, to be able to create a little salve and to put it on our eyes and to be able to make it go away. That worked for him. So I think the importance of being able to pray, and to pray against this virus, and to pray for each other, to pray like we've never prayed before, I think that's so incredibly important, and to be able to see the healing of God work. But sometimes God works through the circumstances in order to be able to bring his glory. Sometimes God is willing to do for our best things that we would prefer that he didn't do, in order that we would be touched in deep ways by him. You remember St. Paul had what he called a thorn in the flesh. 3 times he says that he prayed that God would remove this thing from him, and 3 times God said to him, no. He said, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. Boy, that's a tough one, isn't it? My power is made perfect in your weakness. We don't like weakness. We don't like feeling impotent. We don't like being out of our comfort zone. And yet situations like this come along, and it puts us exactly in those uncomfortable places where we don't know what to do and feel very powerless. And that's from any one of us to the top people in our government. Francis Collins is the head of the NIH. So many of us have seen Tony Fauci, who's the infectious disease person for the NIH, on the news, but his boss is Francis Collins, the director of the NIH. And in the Atlantic Monthly this month, there's a long interview where Francis Collins describes the danger of this virus and why it's important to take it seriously. But then towards the end, the interviewer asks him about mortality and about his own Christian faith, because Francis Collins is a committed Christian, has written books about his understanding of the Christian faith, and he comes to this passage and he says, gosh, he says, one of my great puzzles when I first became a Christian is that verse, my grace is sufficient for you because my strength is made perfect in your weakness. That was so completely upside down for me. Weakness? And now I embrace that with the fullness of everything around me when I'm realizing that my strength is inadequate. Whether it's coronavirus or some family crisis, God's strength is always sufficient. That is such a great comfort, but it took me a long time to get to that point of really owning that one. Boy, we don't like having to go through hard, difficult times. It takes away, shakes from us these securities that we thought were so firm, and yet now really show how fragile they really are. And so now we get left, stripped away in this desert experience of just ourselves and our vulnerability. But the writers of the spiritual life tell us that it is as we go through those desert experiences, it's like a preparation, a training for us, deepening us in terms of our understanding of who we are and who God is. It's a process, as if we open ourselves to it, it's a process that makes us humble. It makes us empathetic with the struggles of others. It helps us to become compassionate and more patient with others. And it helps us to reach out with a hand of compassion, not about what's going to make me feel good, but about how I can genuinely connect with others. There is an opportunity in the midst of this crisis for us to deepen our understanding of who God is, that he is not a formula for us, but he is a mysterious God who shares his life and love with us in deep and powerful ways. Nassim Taleb is an economist who's written a number of books, and especially he was known after the 08-09 financial crisis that shook the banks of this country. And the book in particular that he wrote was called Anti-Fragile. And in that book, he asks the question, so what does it mean to be fragile? And we would say, well, to be fragile means it's easy to break. So it's it's a vase or a glass or something. You drop it and it smashes on the floor, right? It's fragile. So then when you want to ship it or something, you have to put it in a box. You have to wrap it around with all kinds of things. You put fragile on it so that people treat it carefully. It's fragile, breaks easy. And so then he asks the question, so what's the opposite of something that's fragile? And he says, well, maybe it's a rock or a piece of metal, something that if you throw it down, it doesn't break, it just bounces, it's a thud kind of thing. And he says, well, that's true, it's not fragile. He says, but that's really robust. It's not the opposite of fragile, it's robust, you just can't break it. But he says, what about something that is not only not fragile, but is what he calls anti-fragile? What about something that, if you break it, is actually improved? It actually gets better. And so he would say that that was true about the banking crisis in 08-09, that because these weaknesses were all inside the banking crisis, but then it took the crisis and the breaking of it for us to understand better how to put the banking system together to make it more resilient for the future. It's something unique about human life that when we go through breaking experiences, we don't just lay there broken, but rather we come together through the forces that God gives to us in order to be able to be made healed and whole in a whole new and different way, more resilient, wiser, able to better meet the challenges of the world around us. And so this opportunity for us to be able to see this challenge for us as a way that breaks us of these old false securities of ours, and that takes us into a new place, a place of deepened spiritual resilience in a relationship with this God of ours. I was listening to a financial advisor, a podcast this past week, and I listen to him every week, and he was saying on his podcast, he said, you know, I've been an atheist for years. He said, but this morning, unexpectedly, I found myself on my knees on the floor praying out to God for help. This opportunity for us to get in tune with who we really are, with what really matters, how it is we can genuinely connect with ourselves, with God, and with the people around us without these false images that somehow we think give us security when they just simply don't. And so we look to Jesus. We look to Jesus. When everything else is stripped away, we look to Jesus. He says in this passage, he says, night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. I am the light of the world. In this world of darkness, I shine my light. And all of a sudden, everything else comes into perspective, and it's possible for hope to reemerge, and for life to be able to grow, and for beauty to be able to shine, because he is the light that he shares with each one of us. Now you remember that that in another place he says to his disciples, he says, you are the light of the world. You are the light of the world. So which is it? Is he the light of the world, or are you the light of the world? Well, both, right? Because he is the source of all light. He is the one who shines his light into the world, and then each of us have this opportunity with new, bold, and relentless honesty to be able to shine his light, not our light, his light, into the world, so that Christ can be magnified and bring hope through us, reaching out with compassion and care in a way that we hadn't even thought of before, because it wouldn't have made sense before. So these strange days in which we live, when everything is topsy-turvy and all of the things that we counted on just seem to wobble and go away, in the doubt and in the fear of this moment, to allow Jesus to open our eyes, to see his light shine in our lives, and to reflect that light to others. So this week, to allow Jesus to shine on you like you haven't had him shine before, and to be able to shine his light for others with humility and caring and compassion that maybe will take you to a new place, and that'll be for your good. God bless you. We're in this together, the body of Jesus, shining his light. Amen.